In some churches, some people have removed the kneelers. So there is only the place to sit, and if you are to kneel at all, you kneel on the bare floor. Those who removed the kneelers have done damage to the Catholic community. The church never said that. Rome never said that. It is like some churches where they have removed the altar rails. The church from Rome never said to remove the altar rails. But if you can find any document from Rome saying, remove the altar rails, I will give you a turkey.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, after Second Vatican Council, some liturgy experts began to spread this idea. And we have reached a stage where some now are against kneeling. If you kneel, they are harsh on you. They treat you as if you did something wrong. What is wrong with that? If you believe that Christ is our God and he is present, why don't you kneel? Why don't you crawl? Why not show respect? Pope Benedict issued a document to say, in brief, that those who want Mass celebrated according as it was done before the Second Vatican Council, that they can have it. But they only request to be allowed to have Mass as it was done before the Council because it suits their spirituality more. It helps them better to pray. The Holy Father does not want to say no to such people. Pope John Paul II practically said the same, except that Pope Benedict has widened the possible use of that older missal. And the letter to bishops is essentially that. Unfortunately, one of the reasons why people request that Mass is that some priests have not been following the church books faithfully these 40 years. They go to the altar and they do something which they think, but not what Holy Mother Church wrote down. They think they are creative, they think they are spontaneous, they think to make the Mass more interesting, but they are banalizing, they are desacralizing, and that's where some of the people then get sick and tired of that. And they say, enough. Let's go back to how the Mass was 60 years ago. Unfortunately, some of the people who say that don't realize that even 60 years ago, there were some priests also who introduced abuses. So, our prayer and hope is that priests especially be much more serious, devout, and obedient in celebrating Mass. That the Mass is the Mass of the whole church, not the Mass of this priest or that priest or that priest. If all priests celebrated Mass in that beautiful way, those requesting that older form would be less. If all priests sang the Mass in Latin once a month or so, those talking of Latin Mass would be less. Because when some say Latin Mass, they mean the Mass as it was before, 60 years ago. Whereas the Mass as it is today can be sung in Latin, the whole thing. The whole thing can be in Latin. Even if you want the homily in Latin, it can be done. If the priest will consent. So what I am coming to is this. If only priests were careful to follow the approved books, there would be less confusion in the liturgy. The people of God would be better nourished, and there would be less tension. The general instruction on the Roman Missal prefers that people will kneel down during consecration. Once people asked me, if a person votes for abortion, can the person receive Holy Communion? My reply was, do you really need a cardinal from the Vatican to answer that? Get the children for First Communion and say to them, somebody votes for the killing of unborn babies and says, I voted for that, I will vote for that every time. And these babies are killed, not one or two, but in millions. And that person says, I am a practicing Catholic. Should that person receive communion next Sunday? The children for First Communion will answer you that at the drop of a hat. You don't need a cardinal to answer that. Get a good music commission so that they have music book containing Catholic hymns, so that only Catholic hymns are sung. Because what we sing should manifest what we believe and should nourish our faith. And not just sing anything. It should be theologically deep, liturgically rooted, and musically acceptable. Unfortunately, many things sung in some Catholic churches should not figure at all inside the church.
Okay.
I think it was a mistake that they were introduced at all. It is important for priests and families to note that traditionally in the church, the altar boys have received very great attention because from them have come most of our seminarians. Because the altar boys are near the priest, so God gives them in that way grace. If the priest is doing well, they will like to be like him. So it is just natural. The Italians call the altar boys chierichetti, small clerics. Please, give them maximum attention. Sometimes women and girls can also be permitted according to church law if the bishop thinks so. That shows you our mind. Yes. Nevertheless, it's not divine law that girls will not serve Mass. So the church has allowed it. So we go along with it. But if I had my way, you know what would happen. But as for North America or Europe, we think that the dance should not enter the liturgy at all. And the people discussing liturgical dance should spend that time saying the rosary. Or they should spend that time reading one of the documents of the Pope on the Holy Eucharist. We have already enough problems. Why banalize more? Why desacralize more? Haven't we already enough confusion